দেশে বিদেশে সিঁচৰিত হৈ থকা অসম মূলৰ আমি কেইজনমানৰ উদ্যোগত অসমৰ শিক্ষাৰ্থীৰ কাৰণে অসমৰ শিক্ষাৰ্থীৰ কামত আহিব বুলি 15 মিনিট শিক্ষা নামৰ এই অনলাইন মঞ্চখন আৰম্ভ হৈছিল। বিজ্ঞান, কলা, বাণিজ্যৰ কিছুমান প্ৰাসংগিক আৰু গুৰুত্বপূৰ্ণ বিদ্যায়তনিক বিষয়ৰ আলোচনা, বৃত্তি সম্পৰ্কীয় তথ্য, আমাৰ মুলুকৰ জকাইচুকৰ পৰা ওলাই আহি দেশে বিদেশে সফলতাৰ শিখৰত আৰোহণ কৰা যুৱক যুৱতীৰ কাহিনীৰে আমি বিগত 4 বছৰ আমাৰ পষেকীয়া অনুষ্ঠানসমূহ চলাই আহিছোঁ। নতুন কথা শিকি কাৰোবাৰ জীৱনৰে কাহিনীৰে অনুপ্ৰাণিত হৈ শিক্ষাৰ্থীসকল অলপো লাভৱান হ'লে আমাৰ এই প্ৰচেষ্টা সফল হ'ব। 4 বছৰ সম্পূৰ্ণ হোৱা উপলক্ষে আজি এটা বিশেষ বক্তৃতাৰ আয়োজন কৰা হৈছে। আমাৰ মাজত আজি উপস্থিত আছে আমেৰিকা যুক্তৰাষ্ট্ৰৰ এৰিজোনা ষ্টেট ইউনিভাৰ্চিটিৰ শান্তি অধ্যয়নৰ হাৰ্ট নিকাছোছ আসনৰ প্ৰথমগৰাকী অধিষ্ঠাত্ৰী ইতিহাসৰ অধ্যাপক য়াসমিন শইকীয়া। ভাৰত আৰু আমেৰিকা যুক্তৰাষ্ট্ৰত বিভিন্ন পৰ্যায়ৰ আনুষ্ঠানিক শিক্ষা লাভ কৰা ডক্টৰ শইকীয়া 2022 চনত প্ৰতিষ্ঠিত দ্য চেণ্টাৰ অফ মুছলিম এক্সপিৰিয়েন্স ইন দ্য US-ৰ সহ সঞ্চালক। ভাৰত, পাকিস্তান আৰু বাংলাদেশৰ ইতিহাসৰ বিশিষ্ট গৱেষক ডক্টৰ শইকীয়াই ইতিহাস অধ্যয়নৰ জৰিয়তে শান্তি আৰু সংঘাত সম্পৰ্কীয় আমাৰ বোধশক্তি বৃদ্ধিৰ প্ৰয়াস কৰি আহিছে। তেখেতৰ ফ্ৰেগমেণ্টেড মেমৰিজ ষ্ট্ৰাগলিং টু বি টাই আহোম ইন ইণ্ডিয়া গ্ৰন্থখনে নেহেৰু স্মাৰক ন্যাসৰ শ্ৰীকান্ত দত্ত বঁটা আৰু উইমেন ৱাৰ এণ্ড মেকিং অৱ বাংলাদেশ ৰিমেম্বাৰিং 1971 শীৰ্ষক গ্ৰন্থখনে US অৰেল হিষ্ট্ৰী এছ'চিয়েশ্যন বাইনিয়েল এৱাৰ্ড লাভ কৰিছিল। শেহতীয়াকৈ তেখেতে মানৱ শান্তি বিষয়ৰ 3খন গ্ৰন্থৰ ট্ৰিলজি প্ৰকাশ কৰিছে। ডক্টৰ শইকীয়াই নেশ্যনেল এণ্ডাউমেণ্ট ফৰ হিউমেনিটিজ, ফুলব্ৰাইট ফাউণ্ডেশ্যন, হেৰি ফ্ৰেংক গুগেনহাইম ফাউণ্ডেশ্যন, ছ'চিয়েল ছায়েন্স ৰিচাৰ্চ কাউন্সিল আৰু দ্য আমেৰিকান ইনষ্টিটিউটছ অফ ইণ্ডিয়ান বাংলাদেশ এণ্ড পাকিস্তান ষ্টাডিজৰ সন্মানজনক বৃত্তি বঁটা লাভ কৰিছে। প্ৰান্তৰৰ দুৰ্বল জনসমষ্টিৰ কণ্ঠক মান্যতা দি ইতিহাস অধ্যয়নৰ জৰিয়তে শান্তিৰ বিদ্যায়তনিক আৰু সাধাৰণ বোধগম্যতা বৃদ্ধিৰ বাবে নিৰন্তৰ প্ৰচেষ্টা চলাই বিশ্ব দৰবাৰত জিলিকি থকা এইগৰাকী অসম জীয়ৰী অধ্যাপিকা য়াসমিন শইকীয়া বাইদেউলৈ 15 মিনিট শিক্ষাৰ তৰফৰ পৰা আদৰণি জনাইছোঁ। আপোনাৰ বহুমূলীয়া সময় আমাক আমাৰ শিক্ষাৰ্থীসকলক দিয়াৰ বাবে আপোনাক অশেষ ধন্যবাদ। তেখেতৰ আজিৰ এই বক্তৃতাৰ পাছতেই আমি জুম, ইউটিউব আৰু ফেচবুকত অংশগ্ৰহণকাৰীসকলৰ প্ৰশ্ন লৈ তেখেতলৈ আগবঢ়াই দিম। আজিৰ বক্তৃতাৰ শিৰোনামা Along the Brahmaputra's Banks, Remembering Shared Histories of Community Relationship. Baido, over to you.
Thank you, Professor Nath, Dr. Mannan and Dr. Goswami, for the honor you have bestowed on me to deliver the 4th Foundation Day lecture on the 15-minute Xikhya platform. I know you're doing, just talking to you, I know that you're doing amazing work of inspiring a lot of very young people and also established people in Assam to not just interact, but to learn from one another and to make progress in their education and careers. And I congratulate you for doing this from such a distant place like in the United States, connecting 2 very far-off places, Assam and the United States together, and bringing others into conversation too. So thank you. Thank you for the work you are doing. Thank you to the audience in Assam for joining us on a Saturday evening, and Sunday, I think today it is, Sunday evening. Thank you. My presentation is titled Along the Brahmaputra's Banks, Remembering Shared Histories of Community Relationship. I have been asked to speak for 45 to 50 minutes, and then I think it'll be an open forum for the Q&A. I hope this will be an engaging session because a long presentation that I wrote specially for this event. Unlike Professor Nath, I cannot really do academic writing and speaking in Ohomia, although I'm totally conversant and I will answer questions in Ohomia, but my presentation will be in English. So, the mighty Brahmaputra winds its ways through the heart of Assam like an ancient storyteller, carrying in its waters the collective memory of countless generations. This river is not merely a geographical feature, but the very lifeline that has nurtured civilization, witnessed upheavals, and cradled diverse communities along its bank for millennia. As it shifts and changes courses over centuries, it mirrors the fluid, evolving nature of Assam's complex history, a history marked by cultural confluence, contested identities, and remarkable resilience. My own story is linked to the river. As a child growing up in Assam, the Brahmaputra was both playground and mystery, a constant presence that shaped my understanding of home. Today, as a historian, I find myself navigating a unique current between intimate connection and scholarly distance. This duality has been both a challenge and a gift, allowing me to feel the emotional resonance of the histories I study while maintaining the critical perspective my work demands. I study Assam's history as both an insider and an academic, a position that has profoundly influenced my approach to uncovering and interpreting the layered histories of this region. The story of Assam, often relegated to the periphery of South Asian historiography, offers vital insights that can reshape our broader understanding of historical methodologies. Regional histories like Assam's challenge us to move beyond nationalist frameworks and colonial categorizations that have dominated historical discourse. Today, I invite you to journey with me along the Brahmaputra's banks to explore these shared histories of community relationships that narratives of division have too often overlooked. Together, we will discover how remembering these interconnections might illuminate Assam's paths and pathways towards understanding our collective human story. The Brahmaputra is never simply one river. Countless tributaries, the Dibang, Lohit, Subansuri, Kameng, and many others flow into its powerful current, each contributing their waters to the greater whole without completely losing their distinct characters. This convergence offers us a profound metaphor for understanding Assam's historical landscape. Just as these tributaries merge to form something greater than their individual flows, multiple historical narratives, cultural influences, and community experiences have converged to create Assam's multifaceted identity. When we examine Assam's history, we find that this too often been constrained within frameworks imposed from outside, colonial categorization that served administrative convenience rather than reflecting lived realities, or nationalist narratives that flattened the region's complexity in service of a unified story of a single identity. Between these dominant narratives lie the voices we must strain to hear, the everyday negotiations of identity, the pragmatic adaptations of communities, the unexpected alliances that formed and dissolved across supposed boundaries of faith, language, and ethnicity. The history of Assam has often been trapped within false dichotomies: colonial versus indigenous, Hindu versus Muslim, mainstream versus peripheral, Assam versus outsiders. These binaries have fractured our understanding, creating artificial divisions where historical reality was far more nuanced. My work focuses on dismantling these dichotomies to reveal the complex patterns of interaction that define everyday life across centuries, creating a contact zone between peoples, cultures, religions, and ecologies. Consider, for instance, the religious landscape of medieval Assam. While official histories might emphasize moments of conflicts and even give it a religious tinge, like the current memory of the Battle of Saraighat as a struggle between the Mughal or Muslim occupation of Assam, the textual evidence of the Burunjis reveals extensive interaction among the Mughals and Ahoms beyond battle. Let me give you an example that will help you understand this better. When Mir Jumla invaded and occupied Gorgaon, the capital city of the Ahom kingdom, in 1662, the Burunjis record that Sorgodo Joydhar Sinha sent his Muslim noble, Sultan Goria, to seal a treaty with Mir Jumla. Sultan Goria was not the sole Muslim high official under Joydhar Sinha. Several Muslims held prominent positions and were memorialized through copper plates, land grants, marriages to noble women, and distinctive titles. The Muslims of the Ahom kingdom were thoroughly integrated with the non-Muslim counterparts, which was noted by the Mughal chroniclers. Again, we have information from archaeological remains of syncretic practices that facilitated the assimilation of Brahmanic Hinduism with local religions. The story of Ban Raja and Aniruddha in Tezpur exemplifies Assam's syncretic traditions. Ban Raja, originally a powerful Kirota tribal king, was reimagined in local lore as a devotee of Shiva. When Krishna's grandson Aniruddha fell in love with Ban Raja's daughter Ukha through dream encounters, their union sparked conflict between local and pan-Indian divine forces. The resolution, with Shiva mediating peace between his devotee Ban Raja and Krishna, symbolizes how indigenous tradition and Brahmanical Hinduism found harmony in the Assamese cultural landscape. Archaeological remains in Tezpur, including ruins known as Ban Raja's Palace, stand as a physical testament to this blending of religious worldviews that allowed local tribal authority and identity to exist within rather than be erased by the larger Hindu cosmological framework. I have witnessed myself the visible instance of Muslim and Hindu amity expressed during the annual Urs of Ajahn. Hindu and Muslim followers of the saint gather in record numbers, all seeking blessings across supposed religious boundaries. Just yesterday, Prague News documented how communities in Jorhat respectfully celebrated both Ramzan and Holi without fear or tension. My own research journey through Upper Assam reveals this pattern. In December 1992, I arrived in India just days after the Babri Masjid demolition. While Delhi was under curfew with palpable fear, expecting a repeat of communal violence as was the case after the assassination of Mrs. Gandhi in 1984, Assam presented a different reality. In Sibsagar, I was welcomed by the Thai Ahom high priest Domburu Deodhai Phukon, who opened his home and permitted me to study the Ahom Burunjis. Similarly, in 2017, when I met Purnananda Rajkumar, guru of Maibela Ashram, he welcomed me to his home and spoke lovingly of his deep friendship, Bondhutta Aru Sneh, with Muslim Sufi fakir Sayyid Nasrullah Shah Chisti. What happens outside the ashram is beyond my control, he told me. But I tell people not to bring their politics against Muslims to my ashram. One can only hope that we will unite with Khuda and all his lovers beyond man-made divisions someday, he prayed. This understanding between different faith traditions in Upper Assam reflects the enduring moral framework of Moram and Sneh that has characterized the region's history even as communal tensions grow elsewhere. The banks of the Brahmaputra have nurtured extraordinary cultural diversity through centuries of exchange. The Ahom dynasty, arriving from Thai-speaking regions in the 13th century, selectively integrated local practices while introducing innovative administrative systems and cultural elements that transformed the region. Indigenous Boro, Kachari, and Chutia people maintained a distinctive tradition while developing sophisticated networks of agriculture that facilitated interaction with neighboring communities. The missing people's intimate adaptation to the river's rhythms generated specialized ecological knowledge that became fundamental to the region's environmental understanding. Muslims, whether traders, religious scholars, prisoners of war, or invited courtiers, enriched Assam with diverse artistic, architectural, agricultural, and military techniques that were absorbed into local practices. Brahmin scholars from mainland India introduced rituals that evolved into uniquely Assamese Hindu traditions, while Koch, Bengali, Bagania, and Nepali communities contributed vital threads to the region's cultural tapestry. This continuous interweaving of diverse knowledge systems along the Brahmaputra created not merely cultural coexistence, but a dynamic shared heritage that defies simple categorization. What fascinates me most about these communities is not their separation, but their interaction. They are not simple stories of assimilation or resistance, but rather complex processes of selective borrowing, cultural innovation, and pragmatic coexistence. The religious landscape that emerged reflects this complexity. While Assam is often described in terms of its Hindu majority, the reality includes the Vaishnavite reforms of Shankardev that incorporated tribal elements. Islam in Assam has carryovers of folk practices of local origin, and despite strong Brahmanic presence, there is still the persistence of indigenous spiritual traditions that continue alongside and within organized religions. Sacred sites often become sacred spaces with practices and meanings layered upon one another over generations. Perhaps nowhere is this conversion more evident than in language. The evolution of Assamese alongside other languages of the region illustrates both division and connection. While language differences sometimes reinforce community boundaries, they are also created spaces for multilingual practices, borrowed vocabularies, and shared literary traditions. From the courtly Burunjis of the Ahom period written in Thai and Assamese to the folk songs sung in multiple dialect languages have served as both marker of identity and bridge between communities. The history written in these linguistic exchanges, words borrowed from Boro and Sanskrit to Assamese, from Bengali to Missing, from Persian and Arabic to Koch and Assamese, reveals patterns of interaction that official histories often overlook. In these everyday adaptations, we find a different kind of historical record, one that speaks not primarily of conquest and resistance, but of practical ingenuity of communities finding ways to coexist along the banks of a river that both connected and divided them. My journey as a historian, appreciating these connections, began long before I entered any university classroom. It started in the living room of my maternal grandfather's home in Jorhat, where I witnessed a living testament to Assam's interfaith tapestry through his remarkable circle of friends. There was Mr. Comfort, who would arrive with glossy pictures of Christmas in Bethlehem that transported us to distant sacred landscapes. Lal Baba, an embodiment of religious fluidity, wore a crimson kurta and dhoti with a prominent red tilak adorning his forehead, yet spoke of Khuda, Moksha, Fana, and Qayamat as seamlessly as if these Hindu and Islamic concepts emerged from a single spiritual well. Banerjee Babu, a devoted follower of Goddess Kali, possessed an uncanny perception about future events that transcended rational explanation. Most enigmatic was Kambol Phokir, perpetually wrapped in his blanket, regardless of season, speaking in a tongue that I later identified as Urdu, while making his home in a Hindu cremation ground, existing literally at the threshold between worlds. These men would gather together and engage in profound conversations about shared spiritual truths that cross religious boundaries. This plurality extended into my very bloodline. At my paternal grandfather's home in Sipsagar, family stories and written records revealed our descent from Sheikh Azimuddin, a Muslim who came from Delhi and was inducted into the nobility in 1648 by Horgadev Joyadhar Xikhya. A royal woman named Lamoino Gabhuru was given in marriage to him, and he was bestowed the Saikia title and land in Amguri. My paternal grandmother's lineage shared this pattern of Muslim Ahom intermarriage, with her family receiving the title of Nawab from Sargodev Pratap Xikhya. These connections manifested in ongoing practice. I vividly recall my father's profound reverence for the Kali temple near my grandfather's home in Phukarnagar, Sipsagar, and his attachment for the Shiva Dole, which I visited every time we went to Sipsagar. Religious difference was never a barrier. It was a pathway for increasing interactions that etched memories of conviviality among the people of different faiths in my childhood. Even as a child, I knew that Assam is a place where identities were situational rather than absolute, where boundaries between communities were porous rather than rigid. It wasn't until I was in high school that I discovered how these lived realities had been flattened into neater categories that emphasize difference over connection. The History of Assam, written by Edward Gate, that was our textbook, presented Assam as a series of conflicts and conquests, with communities positioned as either indigenous or foreign, traditional or modern, victims or aggressors. My academic training at Aligarh Muslim University and later at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in the United States took me far from the banks of the Brahmaputra, where I gained the methodological rigor and theoretical framework that would shape my professional approach to history. Yet this distance created both challenge and opportunity. How could I apply these scholarly tools to understand a place that lived in my bones? How could I maintain critical perspective while acknowledging the personal investment I brought to this work? These questions became central to my development as a historian. The insider-outsider dynamic has been a constant companion throughout my research career. Rather than seeing this dual positioning as an obstacle, I gradually came to recognize it as a unique vantage point. Standing at the intersection of intimate knowledge and scholarly distance allowed me to serve as translator between worlds, to bring academic rigor to local understandings while challenging academic paradigms with insights derived from lived experience. This liminality became not just a personal challenge, but a methodological strength informing how I approach historical sources and interpret evidence. The challenges to understanding Assam's history from inside using local sources became apparent early in my research career in 1992 when I met Domburu Deodhai. The Deodhai was able to recite some Ahom prayers, do divinations and religious rituals, but he was not conversant in the Thai language to read the original Burunjis. So I had to study Thai and Lao in the US, which equipped me to read Thai Ahom with an Aiton teacher in Guwahati. Reading the Burunjis was very reassuring because identity was not demarcated in the Sorgodoy's kingdom based on religion, but people were identified based on their occupational skills and ethnicity. These divisions, however, were not watertight because people moved between the groups as they were placed by the king. For the king, everyone living within his domain was his subject, and the Burunjis referred to them as Kunhao or the Us people. Searching through colonial archives and official documents of the post-Ahom rule period, I encountered a troubling pattern of silence around precisely the kinds of community relationship that had featured so prominently in the Burunjis, and I had experienced in both my maternal and paternal grandparents' homes. The British administrators' records categorized communities in ways that emphasized difference and conflict, while nationalist histories often subsumed regional complexities under broader narratives of Indian unity or Assamese distinctiveness. For example, I had never read about the contributions of men like Farmud Ali, an ancestral relative, or Bahadur Gambura in my school history books. I learned about their role in 1857 revolt against the British from Bhupen Hazarika's songs. I vividly remember my frustration in a dusty archive in Guwahati, poring over administrative records that reduce rich cultural interactions to statistical tables and ethnographic typologies. Where were the voices of the ordinary people navigating complex identities? Where were the records of cooperation across community lines? These silences in the conventional historical record pushed me towards alternative methodologies that could capture these unwritten histories. Oral history became crucial to my research approach, not as supplementary material, but as the primary methodology for recovering perspectives absent from official records. One interview early in my career had a profound impact. In a small village near Sipsagar, on the Brahmaputra's bank, I spoke with an elderly Kachari man who served as a custodian of a Muslim shrine. He described how the Kachari community has been taking care of this shrine, or Than as he referred to it, because the saint protects them from all ills. The entire village recognizes the importance of the saint's presence in their midst, and community members take individual turns to clean and purify the place with incense and candle every evening. This history of cooperative protection had never appeared in any official record, yet it has been crucial in maintaining a respect for Muslims among the Kacharis of this village, even in volatile times. Perhaps the most profound shift in my perspective came through the study of Bhupen Hazarika's songs and listening to oral tradition of multiple different village communities, Hindus, Muslims, Ahoms, Saudangs, Motoks, Bagania, and so on. I listen to the music of Bhupen Hazarika that draws upon these community stories and transmits them with slight modification, but maintaining core elements that spoke to shared experience of life along the river. These discoveries transform not just the content of my research, but my understanding of historical methodology itself. They reveal that to understand Assam's complex past, we need approaches that can capture fluidity and connection rather than conflict and boundary making. My experience has convinced me that similar methodological innovations might illuminate hidden patterns of connection in other regions of India as well, challenging the divisive categories that colonial and nationalist frameworks have too often imposed. The challenge of decolonizing historical knowledge takes on particular urgency when studying a region like Assam. Colonial frameworks have proven remarkably tenacious, persisting in our historical consciousness long after formal independence. Post-colonial histories, which is often critical of British rule, frequently perpetuate these same frameworks, merely inverting valuations while maintaining the underlying categorizations. Assam's unique historical circumstance demand methodological innovation. As a borderland region experiencing waves of migration, political transitions, and cultural exchange, its history resists frameworks developed for more centralized, stable societies. The fluid boundaries between communities, the practical adaptation to ecological realities, and the pragmatic negotiations of identity all require approaches that can capture complexity rather than impose artificial simplicity. My work has involved developing what I call a riparian methodology, an approach that, like the Brahmaputra itself, acknowledges constant flow and change while recognizing persistent patterns. This methodology recognizes relationship over fixed categories, processes over static conditions, and adaptations over purism. It seeks to understand how communities maintain distinctive identities while engaging in ongoing exchange and negotiation. Just as the river simultaneously connects and separates the communities along the banks, this methodology examines both the maintenance of boundaries and the regular transgression. Centering voices traditionally excluded from historical narratives has been foundational to my research approach. Colonial histories privilege elite male perspectives, British administrators, local nobility, religious authorities, while marginalizing the experiences of ordinary people, women, and communities considered peripheral. These exclusions created distorted understanding, not just of marginalized communities, but of Assamese society as a whole. My current research with communities inhabiting the chors of Borpeta, Dorong, Gwalpara, Baksa, and Dhubri illuminates a neglected dimension of Assam's cultural landscape. These predominantly Muslim communities, often pejoratively labeled as Mia and marginalized as unwanted, possess sophisticated ecological knowledge systems that are vital to region sustainability. Their intricate trading networks form the backbone of local economies, supplying rice and vegetables to major urban centers, including Guwahati. Oral histories from community elders reveal profound understanding of river ecology that has transformed agricultural innovation throughout the region. The patterns of mobility necessitated by the Brahmaputra's erosion and changing course directly challenge harmful narratives that mischaracterize them as infiltrators, land jihadis, or Gedda, filthy and loathsome people. My fieldwork instead documents their intimate knowledge of the river's behavior, social composition for diverse cultivation, regional economic dynamics, and market systems. These communities perform the labor-intensive cultivation that quite literally feeds Assam, embodying a relationship with the land that reflects generations of adaptation and belonging rather than recent arrival. The agricultural expertise represents not an intrusion, but a crucial thread in Assam's complex ecological and cultural tapestry. Gender has proven a particularly valuable lens for re-examining Assam's social formation. Women's experiences, especially in weaving communities, reveal inter-community relationship invisible in male-centered historical accounts. During fieldwork in Pathako, Obhoyagan, Majuli, and Hualkusi, I documented how women weavers across different communities maintain sophisticated knowledge networks that transcend religious and ethnic boundaries. These weavers demonstrate remarkable adaptability, sourcing silk yarn through diverse trade connections, competing with machine-made goods through distinctive craftsmanship, and developing innovative marketing strategies at local shops, resorts, and tourist venues. Their textiles incorporate motifs from multiple cultural traditions, with the loom becoming both a site of cultural preservation and cross-community innovation. Women's tradition of weaving crosses religious boundaries. Literator Imran Hussain describes his Muslim mother completing her morning namaz before sitting at her loom to weave mekla and gamusa for both Eid celebrations and everyday use. Conversations with Boro women in Baksa were particularly revealing. Their testimonies uncovered for me Gender Disaster Response Network, documenting crucial cross-community cooperation during crises. Shared childcare arrangements, collaborative labor in citronella factories, food preservation techniques, and temporary housing support that ensured collective survival. These gendered networks of mutual aid, though absent from official narratives, have been foundational to enabling peaceful coexistence between Assamese, Mia Muslims, and Boro communities in contexts of both environmental and social vulnerability. Religious practices offer compelling evidence of women's role in preserving cultural complexity. Women's ritual traditions, particularly in rural areas, safeguard elements of pre-colonial spirituality otherwise suppressed or transformed by mainstream religious institutions. Throughout communities along the upper Brahmaputra, women-led ceremonies seamlessly integrate indigenous spiritual elements within nominally Hindu and Muslim households. These practices create sacred spaces where multiple traditions coexist without contradiction, demonstrating a religious fluidity that fundamentally challenges narratives of rigid faith boundaries. I have centered these marginalized but critically important aspects of life along the Brahmaputra's bank in my research, revealing an Assam characterized not primarily by separation and conflict, but by ongoing negotiation and exchange. My work shows that in Assam, communities are not bounded, static entities, but they are dynamic, engaged in constant conversation with their neighbors. Most importantly, it recovers historical agency for groups too often portrayed as passive recipients of historical forces, demonstrating instead their active role in shaping Assam's complex cultural landscape. To situate Assam solely within Indian and South Asian frameworks is to miss its profound connections to global historical patterns. The Brahmaputra connects Assam not just to Indian subcontinent, but to Tibet, China, and Southeast Asia, creating networks of exchange that long predated colonial boundaries. These connections position Assam at the intersection of multiple historical worlds, a crossroads where South Asian, East Asian, and Southeast Asian influences converge and transform one another. When we examine Assam's historical experience alongside other riverine societies worldwide, striking parallels emerge. The Mekong Delta, the Nile Valley, and the Mississippi Basin all develop similar patterns of cultural adaptation to river ecologies. Seasonal migration practices, flood-responsive agriculture, and distinctive material cultures shaped by riverine resources. These comparative perspectives reveal Assam not as an isolated case, but as one of manifestation of broader patterns in human adaptations to similar environmental conditions. I have been particularly struck by parallels between Assam and the upper Mekong regions of Thailand that I studied and even had the opportunity to visit. Both areas experienced the migration of Thai-speaking people who established new political systems while absorbing indigenous cultural elements. Both witnessed the overlapping influence of multiple religious traditions, Buddhism, Hinduism, and indigenous practices in the Mekong Valley, Hinduism, Islam, and indigenous beliefs in the Assam Valley. Both developed sophisticated knowledge systems for managing unpredictable river systems and translating environmental instability into cultural resilience. Examining Assam through this comparative lens helps us to move beyond the limitations of nation-centered historical frameworks. Rather than seeing Assam's history as a subset of Indian history or as a peripheral borderland, we can recognize it as a part of a broader pattern of intercultural exchange that characterized Asian history before colonial boundaries hardened. This perspective reveals connections that national frameworks obscures and challenges the artificial separation of region that once existed in regular conversation with one another. The importance of regional histories like Assam in nuancing global historical narratives cannot be overstated. By bringing in these regional specificities into conversation with global historical frameworks, we create more nuanced understanding, not just of regions like Assam, but of global processes themselves. We see how colonialism could not operate as a monolithic force, but through constant negotiation with local conditions. Likewise, we can begin to understand that Indian nationalism cannot be a uniform ideology, but must be in conversation with Assamese identity struggle and address local and regional concerns. The shared histories I have excavated along the Brahmaputra's bank are not merely academic concerns, but hold profound relevance for contemporary Assam that faces significant challenges like environmental degradation, ethnic tensions, economic pressures, and identity politics that sometimes emphasize difference over connection. In this context, remembering the histories of intercommunity relationship and cultural exchange offers not nostalgia, but practical resources for reimagining more inclusive futures. Contemporary identity politics in Assam often invoke historical narratives to justify present-day claims and boundaries. Assertions about who belongs, who is indigenous, and who is outsider rely on particular readings of the past that emphasize separation and conflict while minimizing connections and exchange. Historical research that recovers evidence of fluid identities, intercommunity relationships, and cultural porosity challenges these simplifications without dismissing legitimate concerns about cultural preservation and political representation. My work documenting historical hanmihuli among communities does not deny real tensions that have sometimes existed between them. Rather, it expands the historical repertoire available to contemporary actors, demonstrating that conflict represents only one strand in a complex historical relationship that includes cooperation, exchange, and mutual adaptation. By recovering these alternative histories, we create space for contemporary communities to draw on multiple historical precedents rather than single narratives of opposition. As a historian from the region, I feel a particular ethical responsibility in this work. I'm accountable to academic standards and the communities whose histories I interpret. This dual accountability requires constant reflexivity about how my research might be mobilized in contemporary political contexts, how it might either reinforce or challenge existing power structures, open or close spaces for marginalized voices, or contribute to either division or reconciliation. This ethical position demands methodological humility, a recognition that historical evidence is always partial and interpretation always situated. It requires transparency about the limitation of historical knowledge and caution about claims to definitive or comprehensive understanding. Most importantly, it necessitates ongoing dialogue with the communities whose histories I study, ensuring that their perspectives inform not just my conclusions, but my research questions and methodological approaches. Yet, this ethical position also demands courage, a willingness to challenge simplified narratives that serves political expediency at the expense of historical accuracy. When dominant discourses mobilize selective readings of the past to justify exclusion or violence, historians have an ethical obligation to present evidence of alternative histories. This is not political activism disguised as scholarship, but scholarship fulfilling its essential social function, providing societies with accurate understandings of their past as resources for navigating their present and imagining their futures. By remembering the shared histories that unfolded along the Brahmaputra's bank, we contribute not just to historical understanding, but to an ongoing conversation about what Assam has been, is, and might become. As I conclude this presentation, I invite you to look once more at this mighty river for your own exploration. The Brahmaputra does not stand still. It surges and recedes, shifts its course, carves new channel while abandoning others. Sometimes it flows gently, nurturing the land it touches. At other times it rages in flood, destroying and recreating landscapes in its wake. This ever-changing river offers perhaps the most profound metaphor for understanding history itself, not as a static record of what once was, but as a living, flowing force that continuously reshapes our understanding of both past and present. My own journey as a historian has been transformed by following the river wherever it led me, even when it revealed knowledge that goes against the current of established historical frameworks. This is my invitation to you today to consider how reimagining regional histories like Assam's might transform historical understanding in India and elsewhere. What silences persist in the histories we study? What voices remain marginalized? What connections have been obscured by frameworks that emphasize separation? What methodological innovations might help recover these hidden dimensions? Assam's history, when re-examined with both scholarly rigor and creative openness, offers not just new content, but new approaches that can enrich our collective historical understanding. The Brahmaputra continues to flow as it has for millennia, cutting through the landscapes of Assam while connecting communities along its bank. It reminds us that boundaries, whether geographical, cultural, disciplinary, religious, or anything else, are rarely as absolute as they appear. It teaches us that change and continuity coexist, that destruction and creation are part of the same process, that connection and separation often happen simultaneously. As Assamese, we would do well to embrace these paradoxes rather than resolve them, to develop a capacity to accept the fluidity of identity and be adaptive as a river that has shaped human communities along its banks throughout time. I leave you with an image that I have treasured. Early morning on the Brahmaputra, mist rising from the water's surface as the first light transformed it into something ethereal, neither fully liquid nor fully vapor. In this liminal moment, boundaries blur between water and air, between visible and invisible, between what is and what appears to be. Historical understanding occurs in similar liminal spaces between evidence and interpretation, between past and present, between scholarly distance and personal connection. It is in these in-between spaces that these most profound historical insights often emerge, insights that transcend conventional categories to reveal the complex interconnected realities of human experience. Thank you for joining me on the journey along the Brahmaputra's bank, through the shared history of community relationships that have shaped Assam's past and continue to inform its present. The journey is not over. The river flows on, histories continue to unfold, and our understanding continues to evolve. I invite you to continue the journey with me, to bring your own questions and perspective to these histories, and to consider how regional stories like Assam might transform our broader understanding of the past for a better human future. Thank you.
Thank you, Baidu. Thank you. It was wonderful to listen to you about your journey as a historian, about our rich historical tradition. আপুনি ইমান সুন্দৰকৈ আমাক কথাখিনি ক'লে, আপোনাৰ জাৰ্নিটোৰ কথা, আমাৰ অসমৰ হিষ্টৰিকেল ট্ৰেডিশ্যনৰ কথা। থেংক ইউ ছ' মাছ। আমি প্ৰশ্নোত্তৰলৈ যোৱাৰ আগতে এটা ঘোষণা কৰিব খুজিছোঁ আমাৰ পৰৱৰ্তী অনুষ্ঠানটোৰ বিষয়ে। আমাৰ পৰৱৰ্তী অনুষ্ঠান দুসপ্তাহ পিছত এপ্ৰিলৰ 20 তাৰিখে আছে, আৰু এই অনুষ্ঠানত আমাৰ অতিথি হ'ব স্বনামধন্য ছবি নিৰ্মাতা পাৰভেজ আহমেদ। তেখেতে এডভাৰটাইজিং এণ্ড ফিল্ম মেকিং বৃত্তি সম্পৰ্কে এটা আলোচনা আগবঢ়াব আমাৰ 15 মিনিট শিক্ষাৰ মঞ্চত। তেখেতৰ ইতি তোমাৰ নামৰ এখন ছবিয়ে অলপতে যথেষ্ট প্ৰশংসা বুটলিবলৈ সক্ষম হৈছে। গতিকে আমি আশা ৰাখিছোঁ যে এই মঞ্চত উপস্থিত থকা শিক্ষক শিক্ষাৰ্থী আটাই যাতে আমাৰ পৰৱৰ্তী অনুষ্ঠানতো অংশগ্ৰহণ কৰে। আমি আকৌ আমাৰ আজিৰ অনুষ্ঠানটো বক্তৃতা অনুষ্ঠানৰ মাজলৈ উভতি আহিছোঁ। বাইদেউ, আপোনাক আকৌ কৃতজ্ঞতা জনাই 15 মিনিট শিক্ষাৰ তৰফৰ পৰা মই আশা কৰিছোঁ যে এই মঞ্চত উপস্থিত থকা জুমত উপস্থিত থকা অংশগ্ৰহণকাৰীসকলে তেওঁলোকৰ প্ৰশ্ন পোনপটীয়াকৈ আপোনাক সুধিব আৰু যিসকল আমাৰ ইউটিউব আৰু ফেচবুকত উপস্থিত আছে তেওঁলোকে কমেণ্টছ বক্সত তেওঁলোকৰ প্ৰশ্নবিলাক দিলে সেই প্ৰশ্নসমূহ আমি আপোনালৈ আগবঢ়াই দিব পাৰিম গতিকে আমি প্ৰশ্নোত্তৰ শিতানলৈ উভতি আহিছোঁ মই ইতিমধ্যে এটা প্ৰশ্ন দেখিছোঁ আচলতে আমাৰ পৰৱৰ্তী বক্তা আমাৰ আজিৰ অনুষ্ঠানত উপস্থিত আছে পাৰভেজ আহমেদ তেখেতৰ এটা প্ৰশ্ন আছে সেই প্ৰশ্নটো মই তেখেতক পোনপটীয়াকৈ সুধিবলৈ অনুৰোধ কৰিম ধন্যবাদ
Thank you. Kuna paisane মোৰ মাতটো?
পাইছোঁ
Okay, বাইদেউ, it was a wonderful knowledge. বহুত বস্তু নাজানিছিলোঁ আপোনাৰ পৰা শিকিলোঁ আজি মই বেছি সময় নলওঁ মোৰ খালি এটা আজিকালি কাৰেণ্ট পলিটিকেল চিটুৱেশ্যনত the philosophy we are exposed to now, how do we safeguard the old Assamese society and its love and mutual respect for each other? Because societies are getting divided.
No, I completely thank you for your question and thank you for the honesty with which you have addressed this really contemporary problem. মই অসমীয়াটো চেষ্টা কৰিম ইংলিছত মই মাজে মাজে যেনেকৈ পাৰোঁ কথাখিনি বুজাবৰ কাৰণে কাৰণ মই it's a very complex problem আপুনি যেনেকৈ কৈছে because history is being rewritten and this history is a manufactured history এইটো lived history নহয় কোনো মানুহ বা এটলিষ্ট মই আপাৰ আছামৰ কথা খুব ভালকৈ জানো মই লোৱাৰ আছামৰ কথা এতিয়া মই শিকিছোঁ by going to these chor areas আৰু তাৰ বেলেগ বেলেগ ওচৰ পাজৰীয়া কমিউনিটিবিলাকৰ কথা সিহঁতৰ পৰা শিকিব পাৰিছোঁ কিন্তু there's a completely remaking of history that is coming from, I think, more dharana, or more from my study, is from the Indian national framework, which had very different kind of historical historiography. But there was what we called as historians, when we demarcate history, we talk of different periods of history that the British taught us. India actually nasile periodized history, ancient history, medieval history, modern history, British hikale. Time was divided. A time divide kora loge loge manhuboko he time or bhitor bhoraitle je ekhini Hindu manukhini agor manu Muslim khini pisod ahise ami modernization anisu British and that created new schools of history, communal history, left history, this history, that history, bahut jonto ami Aligarh pohisilu কিন্তু আসামৰ হিষ্ট্ৰীটো ইজ নান অফ দেট আসামে কেতিয়াও তেনেকুৱা হিষ্ট্ৰিঅগ্ৰাফি ডেভেলপো কৰা নাই কেতিয়াও সেই তেনেকুৱা টাইম ফেক্টৰো ডেভেলপ কৰা নাই আৰু সেইকাৰণে দেৰ ইজ এ কাইণ্ড অফ ব্লিডিং অফ হিষ্ট্ৰিজ ইন টু ওৱান টু এনাডাৰ কিন্তু এতিয়া মানুহে হিষ্ট্ৰী নপঢ়া হ'ল আসামত মানে ইন আ ৱে মই blame নকৰোঁ মানুহক because it has become so mechanical ষ্টুডেণ্টে ইমান মেকানিকেল পায় to history খালি dates and এতিয়া অলপ আগতে প্ৰফেচৰ নাথে ক'লে যে খুব পৰীক্ষা হৈ থাকে আসামত ইমান পৰীক্ষাৰ জোৰ যে মানুহৰ সময় নাই ভাবিবৰ কাৰণে they are always constantly just writing questions and answers that they regurgitate based on some books that they're reading আমি যেতিয়া স্কুলত পঢ়িছিলোঁ আমি NCERT কিতাপ পঢ়িছিলোঁ তাতে সেইটো সময়ত খুব নেশ্যনেল হিষ্ট্ৰী কথা সব কথা আসামৰ হিষ্ট্ৰী নাছিলে ইয়াতে অতে ততে কিবা কিবি আসাম হিষ্ট্ৰী পঢ়ো কিন্তু এতিয়া হেতুটো নহয় NCERT CBSE system কিবা হিষ্ট্ৰী বস্তুটোকে উঠাই দিলে there is a complete now erasure deleting of even the Muslim what is called the Muslim period of Indian history Mughal Sughaler কথাটো উঠাই দিলে so তেতিয়া there is a kind of attempt to create amnesia right and to create forgetting among people that what was their lived experience or when we ourselves become participants in forgetting the past and what we grew up with, of course, then we let other kinds of memories invade our mind and take over. Asamot etia hetu, it's becoming not just a kind of indifference to history, but history has become politics. And I think, Parvez, if I may call you Parvez,
Yes.
Apunar juntu question, how do we overcome this? How do we remember the love, the sneh, moram juntu? Amar moi juntu eta through a small story of Maibela Ashramor, Purnanda Rajgowar, Prabhur Kothar, through I try to tell you the story of Moram and Sneh, that Ajon Ahum or Ajon Sufi Fakir ekeleke, they could live together. Ahum, ane teo Hindu Ahum, teo Deodhai Ahum nahoy, and could live together for years and perform the religious activities together, although their own communities also sort of very upset about it. কিন্তু they maintained that friendship. এনেকুৱা গল্প নহয়, এইবোৰ মানুহৰ লিভড এক্সপিৰিয়েঞ্চ, এইবোৰ মানুহে একচুৱেলি এক্সপিৰিয়েঞ্চ কৰি পেলাই আহিছে। এইবোৰ এনেই সপোনত এটা কিবা এটা বা এটা ইমেজিনাৰী বস্তু নহয়। How do we recreate it? I think media, like you, Parvez, you do films, it has a major impact. মানুহে কিতাপ নপঢ়ে আজিকালি, so মই কাকো ব্লেম কৰা নাই, মানে there are different, ইমান বেলেগ channels হৈছে from where we can learn. And how can people like you, who have absolutely the pulse of society and the audience ready to listen to you through visual narratives, how can we create such narratives that allow Ohomia people to know themselves from their historical memory, not from the memories of some outsider coming and telling them what they should be and how they should live without cooperation and connection? I think it's a big responsibility. I'm going against the conventional currents of history to keep writing about these stories of the commonality, the convivability, the friendship between people, so that even though I may be a very marginal voice, more কোনো impact নাই কটুত, কিন্তু if I keep writing, maybe 20 years later, কোনোবাই যদি পঢ়ি পেলাই কয় যে হয় অসমতো এইটো আছিলে, এইটো এটা কালচাৰ আছিলে, কোনোবা এজন মানুহে লিখি থৈ গৈছে. So that would hopefully have an impact. So it's a long-term kind of approach we have to take. We have to keep doing the work, and we have to use the channels that are more popular and readily accessible to influence a positive story rather than a destructive story. I mean, we have to be very ethical, and our ethics have to be informed by our own past rather than the present and the future that is being spun in front of us by people with very short-sighted and very selfish agendas, I think. মই খুব দীঘলীয়াকৈ to answer to দিছো, খুব philosophically কৈছো কথাটো, কিন্তু I think we each have a responsibility. মই সেইটোৱে I'm trying to emphasize, কাৰণ the currents are very anti such approach. They don't want you to think like this. They want us to fear one another. They want us to distrust one another. Kintu, despite that, I mean, to continue koriboi legbo, because this is, and আমাৰ হাড়ে হিমজুৱে এইটো বস্তু, DNA আছে এইটো বস্তু. How can we forget our DNA? আমি যদি বেমাৰৰ কথা ইমান ভাবি থাকো, আমাৰ DNA কি বেমাৰ আছে, আমাৰ এটা মেমৰি আছে, আমি সেইটো we have to preserve.
Thank you, Baido.
Thank you, Baido. আৰু এটা প্ৰশ্ন আহিছে, তেখেতৰ নামটো ধানমণি বুলি ইয়াত আছে। আপুনি প্ৰশ্নটো নিজে সুধি দিব পাৰে। আপুনি আনমিউট কৰি পেলাই প্ৰশ্নটো সুধি দিয়ক বাইদেউ।
হেল্ল' বাইদেউ,
কোৱা।
মোৰ নাম ধনমণি কলিতা। আপুনি ৰিপাৰিয়ান মেথডলজি বুলি কথা এটা কৈছিলে।
হয়।
So actually অলপ যদি আপুনি বহলাই কয়, how does this methodology work actually? So মই হিষ্ট্ৰী পঢ়াও এখন কলেজত।
Okay, I've just come up with it myself. মই ক'তো দেখা নাই বা মই ক'তো পঢ়া নাই সেইটো কথা, কিন্তু I'm using the concept of the river. The river is constantly moving and changing, right? It is in flux all the time. Brahmaputra এটা destruction কৰে, এটা মানে improvement to it. There's silting that allows for new kind of growth and community development, inhabitation, and villages and all springing up. But at the same time, it also, through its floods and other kind of thing, it shifts people, right? Likewise, the Brahmaputra has also been a factor of both fluidity and constancy. So I have come up with how to explain this in a way. I have come up with this concept called riparian methodology. River juntu at a course that I follow korwami. River juntu pattern of flowing, of silting, of building, of destroying. We start seeing that it is not constant, but it is a thing of, there is a connection between all of it, the growth and the destruction. And plus it brings in new elements, new confluences, new possibilities. So গোটেইটো mix কৰি ল'লে, I found that it becomes like a reverse methodology. The method of how a river flows is how history flows, and how history can be both creating, like battles, say, for example. Battles create destruction, but battle also create the possibility of new developments, whether it is technology of warfare, whether it is interaction, whether it is negotiation and treaties, new communities. So if you take the river as your metaphor and you think of history like the river, tetia apuni eta possibility of this constant evolution and development, that there is nothing static. It is an evolving, unfolding process, and it is up to us, the participants in this history, or like the residents of the river, to figure out how to live with it and how to make sense of it. So that is what I mean by the riparian methodology. Does it explain? Does it work for you, Kolda sir? Have I been able to explain to you?
আপোনাক আপুনি
Yes,
আনমিউট
হয় বাইদেউ, thank you.
আৰু যদি দীঘলীয়াকৈ লাগে, please write to me an email.
Okay, sure, I'll mail you.
Yasmin Saikia.
Sam নকলেও হ'ব, তুমি বুলি ক'ব পাৰে। Thank you.
আপুনি মোক
আপোনাক
লিখিলে
এতিয়া
মই
কৰিছোঁ।
আপোনাক পঠুৱাই দিম। মই এইটো I just developed it for this particular presentation mostly.
Oh, thank you. I learned this new thing. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
আদ্ৰিতাৰ এটা প্ৰশ্ন আছে। আদ্ৰিতা আপুনি নিজে সুধি দিব পাৰে প্ৰশ্নটো বাইদেউক আনমিউট কৰি পেলাই।
Hello, ma'am.
Hello.
Thank you for the interesting lecture. I am a research scholar at Dibrugarh University. My question was on how now the state has induced their own political identities, is trying to induce their own political identities, and there are already the oral traditions that has been going on. So how, recently I went to, and I have read your article on Madame Mephi and how once you visited in Guwahati.
Article 2, Madame Mephi.
Yeah, so now everyone has their own identity politics and trying to have their own how some identify with something else, and there is a state identification of how the marginalized communities are. So how do we know that this is right or this is wrong, and how do we identify ourselves, if it's making any sense?
No, it is making sense, because I remember your Madame Mephi article where you wrote about, I think, one grandfather or ceremony too. Why not?
No, ma'am, I didn't write. No, it's not me.
Dibrugarh University, okay. So, because Madame Mephi itself is not new, not an old ceremony.
Yeah, I have read your article actually. That's what I was saying.
নহয় বস্তু বুৰঞ্জীত চালে তুমি নেদেখা কতো মেডাম মেফিৰ কথা। এইটো এটা যেতিয়া কমিউনিটি এটা কমপ্লিটলি neglected হৈ গ'ল, or there has been a kind of process of what Ahom, Deodhai Ahoms will say, Bailung Deodhai Ahom or community মানুহে ক'ব, the Hinduization. So in a way, Madame Mephi becomes a tool to show that we are not 100% Hindus, আমাৰ নিজৰ কিছুমান tradition আছে, and those traditions should also be respected. তেতিয়াৰ পৰা 1991 and 1992 পৰা Madame Mephi এটা state function হিচাপে celebrate kora hol, right? But this does not mean that there was no concept of dampota, the worship of ancestors among even Ahoms who had converted to Hinduism, right? Hey ghorar bhitor hetu bostu প্ৰচলিত হৈ আছে, সেইটো কেতিয়াও শেষ হোৱা নাই মই জানা মতে, কিন্তু এটা পাব্লিক হিচাপে এইটো এটা নতুন ডেভেলপমেন্ট হৈছে, right? So তুমি যোনটো কথা সুধিছা যে what is right and wrong, what I'm trying to explain in my historical research is that there is no right or wrong history. History is a continuously evolving story of community interaction. History is not some state kind of measure or state narrative that is imposed on the people. Hetu eta beleg history. State history has a different function, and people living in history have a different experience. Moi junbur kotha likhu, বা মই যোনবোৰ histories or কথা গুৰুত্ব দিওঁ, I pay attention to those interactions even in the Burunjis, right? I'm not so bothered about state কোন Rajai Kargot fight kori play ki pale ki na pale. That is a state version to show that they are successful conquerors or successful state builders, kingdom builders over. It is not a question of right or wrong. My perspective to me bhabi lobo lagibo je moi kuntu angle pa moi mor history to likhim. I have decided that I will write history of community. That community life becomes real rather than communities, death and destruction. That is the present politics, right? And I do it deliberately. কাৰণ মই কৈছোঁ হিষ্ট্ৰী মোৰ কোনো কম্প্ৰিহেনচিভ বা খুব ডেফিনেটিভ কিবা কথা লিখিছোঁ সেইটো নহয়। হিষ্ট্ৰী মোৰ হিষ্ট্ৰীটো তুমি ৰিফিউট কৰিব পাৰা, তুমি বেলেগ ধৰণৰ হিষ্ট্ৰী পঢ়িব পাৰা। হিষ্ট্ৰী ইজ এন ইণ্টাৰপ্ৰিটেশ্যন, কিন্তু তাত এথিক্স এটা থাকিব লাগিব। মই কিহৰ কাৰণে এইটো হিষ্ট্ৰী লিখিছোঁ? তুমি যোনটো কৈছা যে আৰু আগতেও পাৰভেজ আহমেদে কৈছে আজিকালি খুব ডিষ্ট্ৰাক্টিভ হৈ গৈছে বস্তুটো। আমি এতিয়া সুধিব লাগিব এইটো হিষ্ট্ৰী কিয় লিখা হৈছে এইটো সময়ত। হোৱাট ইজ আজিকালি হিষ্টৰিয়ানে এইটো হিষ্ট্ৰী কিয় লিখে about destruction, about opposition, about conflict? কাৰণ there is a purpose. To me, they're unethical. সিহঁতৰ কোনো moral compass নাই যে মানুহবোৰ সদায় থাকিব লাগিব ইয়াতে। মানুহবোৰতো মানে বেগপত্ৰ লৈ পেলাই ক'ৰবাত গুচি যাব নোৱাৰে মানুহবোৰ। অসমৰ মানুহবোৰ অসমতে থাকিব লাগিব। How do we make them help them learn to live with one another better by looking at history? So right wrongৰ কথা নহয়, আমি নিজে ভাবিব লাগিব আমি যোনটো কাম কৰিছোঁ, does it help community নে does it destroy community? মই যদি ভাবিছোঁ মোৰ কমিউনিটিটোৱে খালি জীয়াই থাকিব লাগিব, বেলেগ মানুহবোৰ চব মৰি থাকক তাতে, তেতিয়াহ'লে I don't think my role as a historian, মই political role এটা প্লে কৰিছোঁ. I'm not playing the role of a human historian. মই যদি হিউমেনিটিৰ কথা ভাবোঁ, তে মই ভাবিব লাগিব যে মোৰ নিচিনাকৈ চব মানুহে এটা prosperity, well-being, harmony থাকিলে এই জেগাখন ভাল হ'ব। So right wrongৰ কথা নহয়, মই নিজে ভাবি ল'ব লাগিব যে মই কেনেকুৱা হিষ্ট্ৰী লিখিলে এই প্ৰচেছটো আৰু ডেভেলপ হ'ব পাৰে আৰু ইম্প্ৰুভ হ'ব পাৰে আৰু আমি এটা নতুন ফিউচাৰ ভাবিব পাৰোঁ য'ত আমাৰ well-being and harmony allows us to progress and prosper rather than destroy and create violence and fear among one another. Does it make তুমি মেডাম মেফিটো এটা বেলেগ এটা বস্তু, সেইটো ষ্টেট বস্তু মই যদি কৈছোঁ। আৰু তুমি ঘৰত যোনটো দাম পতা কৰি আছিলে তুমি যদি সেইটো চোৱা তুমি দেখিবা যে বহুত ডিফাৰেঞ্চ আছে। তুমি পাঠাকো গাঁৱত যদি বহি পেলাই চোৱা গৈ পেলাই এইটো বস্তু তুমি এতিয়া নাজানো মই 1992, 93 কথা কৈছোঁ। মই যেতিয়া এইবোৰ আৰম্ভ হৈছিলে তেতিয়া ইট ৱাজ ভেৰি ডিফাৰেণ্ট, ৰাইট? আৰু তুমি আৰু এটা কথা জানা যে এই বস্তুবোৰ যেতিয়া ষ্টেট লেভেলত আহে, there's also international actors influencing. সেইটো সময়ত Thai এটা গ্ৰুপ এটা আছিলে, Thai scholarly group এটা আছিলে। They were very influential in trying to help অসমৰ আহোমখিনিক to become Thai-like rather than অসমীয়া-like. সেইটো এটা separation এটা কৰিব গৈছিলে, but it had never become very successful because the Thai Ahom community felt closer to being Assamese while maintaining their own certain rituals and their own culture, right? But they also appreciated the Thai and the Thai interest in them, but they never saw themselves as some kind of secessionist.
Thank you, Baru. There are a lot of comments on Facebook. Actually, there is someone, Anantanath. Thank you, Mr. Nath. Teo eta comment likhise. I will read it for you. Just speechless. I do not remember if I have listened to a speech with such rapt attention in the recent past. As a river engineer by profession, I can feel how authentic is the metaphor you brought between surge and ebb of the flow of the Brahmaputra and the community relationship in its watershed. Congratulations, and cannot thank you enough.
Thank you.
আৰু এটা একচুৱেলি দিছ ৱাজ এ কমেণ্ট মোৰ লাইক মনোৰম গগৈ এটা প্ৰশ্ন সুধিছে ফেচবুকত যে বাইদেউ আপুনি নাভাবেনে যে শিক্ষিত সচেতন মানুহবোৰে মাত মাতি থাকিব লাগিব?
Absolutely. শিক্ষিত মানুহে যে সচেতন হ'ব, sometimes I doubt কিন্তু দাদা। মানে আমাক এডুকেশ্যনে does it make us humanistic? There is education making us only interested in career মানুহৰ থাকিব লাগিব। I'm not undermining career, success in career. কিন্তু career at the cost of humanistic understanding of the larger questions of why are we human? আমাক human what is the purpose of being মানুহ যদি যোনটো ভূপেন হাজৰিকাই কৈছিলে মানুহে মানুহৰ বাবে যদি মানুহে মানুহৰ কাৰণে নাভাবে তেতিয়া যিমানে আমি শিক্ষা লওঁ I don't think আমাৰ human progression হৈছে আমি human হিচাপে regress কৰিছো কিন্তু আমি career বা professionally খুব আগবাঢ়িছো পইচা পাতিত বহুত আগবাঢ়িছো সেইটো মই খুব আজিকালি unfortunately মই ইণ্ডিয়া অসমত খুব বেছি কৰি দেখো And I don't have any issue about people making a ton of money, but I have a problem with people not sharing their well-being with others. মানুহৰ সৰু সৰু এটা মানে এটা যেনিবা মই আপোনাক কোভিডৰ সময়তে যেতিয়া মই আছিলো আমাৰ মই খাৰগুলিত থাকো খাৰগুলিৰ পৰা মই ৰিভাৰখন খুব মই ৰিভাৰৰ কাৰণে খাৰগুলিত এটা ফ্লেট এটা কিনিছিলো ব্ৰহ্মপুত্ৰক চাবৰ কাৰণে আৰু এই মই কনক্লুজন যোনটো লিখিছো about the ethereal connection between land and air water and thing comes from my observation there standing there and watching the river all the time সেইটো সময়ত মই দেখো যে খুব নাৱত উঠি উঠি কিছুমান মানুহ আহি পেলাই আমাক ভেজিটেবল দি থৈ যায় পিছত মই গম পালো সিহঁতৰ গাঁৱত গৈ পেলাই এইবোৰ মিয়া মানুহ সেই মিয়াখিনিয়ে যদি আমাক নোখোৱালেহেঁতেন সেইটো সময়ত গুৱাহাটীৰ সেইটো চুকত we would have not survived মই আপোনাক সঁচাই কৈছো আমাক ওলাবলৈ নিদিয়ে কাৰফিউ I'm not used মইতো আমেৰিকা থাকিলে I'm not মানে আপুনি খাৰগুলিৰ পৰা ওলাই যাব নোৱাৰে to buy anything আৰু তাতো কোনো দোকান পোহাৰ একো নাই so it was a মানে horrific time আমাৰ কাৰণে মোৰ আৰু মোৰ হাজবেণ্ডৰ কাৰণে আমি কাকো চিনি নাপাওঁ কাকো নাজানো so when you ask this question that you know the humanity মানে the education and humanity সেই মানুহবোৰ অশিক্ষিত মানুহ আছে the Mias who had to come in the boat ৰাতি 3টা বজাত আহিব ৰাতিপুৱা 5টা বজাত আহি পেলাই বস্তু দি থৈ যায় সেইখিনি অশিক্ষিত মানুহ but they understood that এইখিনি মানুহে খাব নাপায় মৰিব যদি আমি অলপ সাপ্লাই নকৰো plus it was profitable for them right so দুফালে আমাক সার্ভ কৰিছে কিন্তু if we do not আমি শিক্ষা লৈ পেলাই যে আমি মানুহৰ কথা নাভাবো তেতিয়া সেই শিক্ষা কোনো মোৰ হিচাপত মোৰ ইয়াত কোনো কামেই নাই There is no need to be so educated if we do not think of the well-being of humanity. Then we can just pursue whatever other things we want to do rather than education. That is my approach. I'm not lecturing anybody and I'm not trying to say that sobe to follow kribo lebo etu more nijor ethics etu. And as I said, I learned it from my parents and my grandparents. Both my parents were professors. So I have seen what education meant to them and how they have used education to help community. And as I said about my more Kokadeuta, Hibohagor Kokadeuta was a high school, Hibohagor headmaster asile, Karamudin. So I've seen this. Moi do horupai dekhi ahisu. Moi kunu education, moi hodai, I understood education as a way of improving yourself and improving the humanity around you. আৰু মই সেই হিচাপে চলি আছো
Thank you, বাইদেউ নবনীতা বৰুৱা আপোনাৰ এটা কমেন্ট আছে আপুনি নিজে কৈ দিব পাৰে আপুনি যেহেতু আছে আপুনি আনমিউট কৰিব পাৰে
Good morning, Asurifa. Thank you so much. Good morning, বাইদেউ খুব ভাল লাগিলে আপোনাৰ ইমান ধুনীয়া ইমান সাৱলীলকে ইমান ধুনীয়া সুন্দৰ কথা কৈছে আৰু মই কমেন্টটো লিখিছিলো গতিকে কমেন্টটো মই পঢ়ি দিছো যে it was really wonderful and enriching to hear about the histories of community relationship along the Brahmaputra banks ইমান সুন্দৰকে আপুনি কৈ গৈছে and that to highlighting inclusivity যেটো কথা কৈ আছো equity আমি সদায় হেতু কথাকে কৈ থাকো শিক্ষাত mutual respect and love and that really fills my heart and thank you once again for this insightful and meaningful deliberation বাইদেউ মোৰ দেউতা হিষ্ট্ৰী আছিল দেউতা অৱশ্যে ঢুকুৱা বহুত বছৰ হ'ল মই মঙ্গলদৈ দেউতা মঙ্গলদৈ কলেজৰ আছিল ডক্টৰ দীপ্তি প্ৰসাদ বৰুৱা
Thank you to share koile about your dad and also your own academic journey. কিন্তু মঙ্গলদৈ মানে মই এতিয়াহে যোৱা হৈছে মই honestly কৈছো মানে এই মিয়া কমিউনিটিটো পঢ়িবৰ পৰা সিহঁতৰ লাইফষ্টাইলটো সিহঁতে কি কৰি কেনেকৈ খায় কেনেকৈ মই এতিয়াহে কিছুমান বস্তু বুজিছো যোনটো আমাৰ আপাৰ আসামত মই সেইটো বস্তু বুজাও নাছিলো দেখাও নাছিলো so মই কেতিয়াবা মঙ্গলদৈলৈ আহিলে I will want to meet you নবনীতা
বাইদেউ মই আচলতে এই সময়ত মঙলদৈত নাই, যদিও মই মঙলদৈ বুলি ক'লো যিহেতুকে মোৰ দেউতাৰ চাকৰি সূত্ৰে মঙলদৈত আছিলে, কিন্তু মোৰ মা দেউতা দুয়ো উজনিৰ, মোৰ দেউতা গোলাঘাটৰ, মা যোৰহাটৰ, আৰু ময়ো চাকৰি সূত্ৰে শিৱসাগৰত আছিলো। গতিকে শিৱসাগৰৰ কথা কৈছে, খুব ভাল লাগিছে। আজান পীৰৰ কথা মই নিজেই ইনফেক্ট যেতিয়াই মই যাওঁ আজান পীৰলৈ মই যাওঁ, যদিও মই হিন্দু, সেই কথাটো মানে ইমান ডাঙৰ, আই ডোন্ট নো যে ৱেডাৰ ইট ইজ অ'কে টু লাইক এক্সপ্ৰেছ ইয়ৰ লাইক অন পাৰ্চনেল ফিলিংছ, কিন্তু মই এতিয়াও যাওঁ, আজান পীৰলৈ যাওঁ। আৰু যেতিয়া গুৱাহাটীলৈ যাওঁ তেতিয়াও মই বুঢ়া মছজিদলৈ যাওঁ। সেইটো মোৰ এটা বিশ্বাস যে আচলতে কেনেকে আমাক, বিশ্বাসটো নিজৰ কথা।
সৰুতে সদায় যেতিয়াই মানে শিৱসাগৰ যাওঁ, we always go to শিৱদৌল। শিৱদৌলত নগ'লে মানে it's like শিৱসাগৰ অহা নহ'লে এনেকুৱা হয় বস্তুটো।
শিৱদৌললৈ যাওঁ, আৰু ইফালে আকৌ আচৰিত হ'ব মানুহে চাগে বহুতে যে মই আচলতে যেতিয়া গুৱাহাটীলৈ যাওঁ, মোৰ এইটো বিশ্বাস, গতিকে মই গুৱাহাটীলৈ গ'লে মই মাজাৰলৈ যাওঁ। গতিকে মানুহৰ বিশ্বাস, গতিকে আপুনি যিখিনি কথা কৈছে সঁচাকৈ খুব ভাল লাগিলে, যে ইট ৰিয়েলি ফিলছ মাই হাৰ্ট। আৰু মই কওঁ যে মই আচলতে এতিয়া মই মঙলদৈত নাই, মই এতিয়া ইয়াতে আছোঁ, মই টেক্সাছত। মই বৰ্তমান মই আচলতে বহুত দূৰ, বহুত কেইবা বছৰো, প্ৰায় মই 20 বছৰৰ ওপৰৰ মই শিৱসাগৰ বেতবাৰী হাই ছেকেণ্ডেৰী স্কুলত ইংৰাজী শিক্ষকতা কৰি মই বৰ্তমান ছেম হিউষ্টন ষ্টেট ইউনিভাৰ্চিটিৰ কলেজ অফ এডুকেশ্যনৰ মই ডক্টৰেল প্ৰগ্ৰেমত আছোঁ। গতিকে মই বৰ্তমান এতিয়া ডিচাৰ্টেশ্যন ষ্টেজত। ইট ইজ ৰিয়েলি ৱাণ্ডাৰফুল। আৰু মই 15 মিনিট শিক্ষাকো এই আপাহঁতে কংগ্ৰেচুলেশ্যন জনাইছোঁ যে তেওঁলোকৰ এই জাৰ্ণি কণ্টিনিউ কৰক, just to inspire and ignite the young minds. Thank you so much, madam.
Thank you.
হিৰণ্যদা, আপোনাৰ কিবা আছে এড কৰিবলৈ?
বাইদেউ, মই নিজে এটা আপোনাক প্ৰশ্ন সুধো। আমাৰ হিষ্টৰিকেলি আমাৰ অসমৰ ছ'চাইটিখনৰ কিবিলাক ফল্ট লাইন আছে যিবিলাকে মানে ওৱান্স ইন এ হোৱাইল আমাৰতো সংঘাতবিলাক হৈছে, নোহোৱা নহয়। হিষ্টৰিকেলি বহুত সংঘাত অসমৰ ছ'চাইটিখনত দেখিছোঁ। কোনবিলাক ফল্ট লাইন আমাৰ ছ'চাইটিখনৰ যিবিলাকে আমাক মানে খুব ভালনাৰেবল কৰি ৰাখে বুলি আপুনি ভাবে? কাৰণ সেইবিলাক জনাটো আই থিংক ইভেন প্ৰেজেণ্ট কনটেক্সট ইজ ভেৰি ইম্পৰ্টেণ্ট। গতিকে আপুনি অকণমান সেই কথাখিনি কৈ দিব নেকি?
Sure, it is a very profound question. You're asking for a lot of self-reflexivity from the community. I mean, as you said, what are our fault lines? What are our shortcomings that have become our baggage, our problem now, and has been exploited, right? I'm thinking more personally, like when I told you about my grandfather's households, খুব পুৰণা কথা নহয়, it's around late 70s or কথা মই আপোনাক কৈছো, that things were very different, খুব amicable asle manhubor, right? What was it that made them amicable towards one another? Was it that they were living in some kind of a small bubble in Assam, that they did not feel the need to think themselves as part of a larger story or history or a larger kind of landscape called India? India was an identity. That India is the nation, kintu nijor identity khub Ohomia centric asile, which made them both, I think, very confident, but at the same time isolated and disconnected, right? Another evidence new. My parents, bahirot pohisile, kintu they never thought of living outside. Ami pohimeli Ohomole ghuri jam, Ohomor kam korim, Ohomor. So bahir was always something outside. Anything outside Assam was bahiror bostu. আৰু অসমখন এখন নিজৰ কিবা পাপুতি হাহন আমাৰ এইখনে জেগা. And people seem to somehow, that kind of mentality, while they were high, people like them, there were many, মই জানো যে বহুত মানুহ আমেৰিকাত আহিও পঢ়িছিলে 50s, 60s, সব অসমলৈ ঘূৰি গ'ল. They do not, somehow they felt distant from the rest of Indians, and also from the rest of the world, and Assam was their comfort zone, at a home space, at a comfort zone. Hey, bostutu, one can say, is both good and bad, right? Apni the basic introspective, inward looking, then you are not aware of the outside forces and how the outside forces are working against you. In the case of Assam, outside forces বোৰ to আমি 1980 প্ৰায় তাৰ আগৰ পৰাই দেখি আহিছো that Assam movement হোৱাৰ, which I've written extensively, বহুত internal causes আছে আৰু external causes আছে. অসমৰ মানুহৰ grievances, economic hardship, lack of professional development, good education, good connectivity, এইবোৰ একদম infrastructural problem যিবোৰ আছিলে, সেইবোৰ legitimate causes of grievances and concerns আছিলে. কিন্তু তাৰ ওপৰতো we do know that organizations like RSS and others have been working in Assam from 1937 on the guise of flood relief. Brahmaputra flood হয়, আহি পেলাই এইটোত কিবা সহায় কৰিব, সেইটোত সহায় কৰিব, এটা সৰু স্কুল খুলি ল'ব, একলব্য স্কুল, and they have been working. সিহঁতে কোনো political কাম কৰা নাছিলে, সিহঁতে মানুহৰ লগত গৈ পেলাই মানুহৰ কাম কৰিছিলে, which by 70s, there were enough factors within the Assamese community that started listening to them, that Assam is under threat. And this threat has to be addressed by eliminating the outsiders. That the outsider was so distant for Assam that they started believing that outsider kibata at a hat ase, there's a hand of outsiders who are destroying Assam. And who is this outsider? We turn not against the big people. Hebrew bhul korisile, ulfai gotle khub Marwari ba Punjabis বা other kind of non-Assamia মানুহৰ against যোনবোৰ violence কৰিছিলে, that was absolutely মানুহে condemn কৰিব লাগে এনেকুৱা violence. Not that I'm against the idea that Assamor respect, Assamor grievances, Assamor identity should be respected and dignified and upheld, but it should not come at the cost of violence, right? কিন্তু সেই বাহিৰগতা কথাটো গৈ পেলাই হৈ গ'ল এণ্টি-মিয়া, এতিয়া এণ্টি-মিয়াৰ পৰা হ'ল এণ্টি-মুছলিম, এইটো বস্তু progression বা regression হৈ আহি আছে, right? So fault line বোৰ আমি প্ৰথমতে নিজকে চিনি পাব লাগিব. Why Assam is not an isolated community, rather what I've been trying to say, that the river has made us connections not only internally, but connections with Southeast Asia, with Tibet, with China. আৰু আমি যদি সেই openness to develop that we are actually an open society. We are a society that includes, we incorporate, we integrate. We are inclusive people in the sense that we do not destroy ourselves and we do not destroy others, but we create confluences that allow us to evolve and move forward in this human journey. That confidence will allow us, I think, to see the problems within our own society and address it. আমি যেতিয়ালৈকে নিজৰ আমাৰ প্ৰব্লেমবোৰ আমি নিজে এটা ল্যাঙ্গুৱেজ নিদিওঁ, যোনটো প্ৰফেসৰ নাথ আপুনি খুব ধুনীয়াকৈ বুজিছে যে আমাৰ ফল্ট লাইন্সবোৰ কি. ইউ আৰ আস্কিং আছ টু লুক এট আৱাৰ অন সেলভস, ৰাইট? আমি যোনবোৰ প্ৰব্লেমছ আমি ক্ৰিয়েট কৰিছোঁ, আমি যদি সেইটো প্ৰব্লেমছ আমি নিজে এড্ৰেছ নকৰোঁ, দে আদাৰ্ছ উইল অনলি কাম এণ্ড ইনষ্ট্ৰাক্ট আছ, এণ্ড দ্যাট ইনষ্ট্ৰাকশ্যন ইজ নট ফৰ আৱাৰ ৱেল বিং, দ্যাট ইনষ্ট্ৰাকশ্যন ইজ গোয়িং টু support their causes, not ours. So first, a human, আমাৰ অসমীয়া self-reflexivity হ'ব লাগিব, that আমি, why are we afraid of outsiders? মই প্ৰথমতে সেইটো question সুধিম. What is the fear of outsiders? Do we think that they are going to rob us of our culture? They are going to destroy us? Or they will supersede us? আমি কি প্ৰথম আমাৰ কি ভয় হৈছে, সেই ভয়টো আমি address কৰিব লাগিব. And I think once we start addressing that fear of the outsider and the outside world, we will start asking questions about ourselves that may show us that to some extent we are the cause of the problem. The problem is not just imposed on us, we are also causing it. And it is, that can be a societal way of approaching. But we also have to be aware that the fault is not necessarily all on community, fault is also on individuals. Our individual সকলে যোনবিলাকে আমাক leadership দিছে, বা আমাৰ educational gurus, বা আমাৰ religious authorities, how much are they working together? Are they really helping people to be together? If they are not helping, then we have to ask difficult questions of them. That do you have the right to be a leader? Apnar jodi leadership is divisive, যিকোনো মোৰ এজ এ টিচাৰ মই ক'ম মই যদি মোৰ ষ্টুডেণ্টক ডিভাইচিভনেছ শিকাওঁ am I really teaching them properly am I really trying to pursue a political agenda এইটো অসমত অসমৰ মানুহখিনি সুধিব লাগিব এইবোৰ কথা নিজকে যে আমাৰ টিচাৰবিলাকে কি কৰিছে আমাৰ পলিটিচিয়ানে কি কৰিছে আমাৰ ৰিলিজিয়াছ অথৰিটিবিলাকে কি কৰিছে and then you start seeing that আমি খুব probably a very selfish community in some way আমি খুব short-sighted কৰি পেলাই ভাবো and we are then in our own greed and avarice for power and wealth we are able to sacrifice community interests. So community is a problem, I say, inward looking, as I'm saying, isolated. They're very uncertain about outsiders. Likewise, our leaders are taking advantage of this feeling. And then we have the outside elements, as I said, about RSS or any other group that's coming and imposing a certain way of thinking, and we are blindly following them. So আমাৰ টেকনলজিকেল ডেভেলপমেণ্ট বহুত কৰিবলৈ আছে মানুহে খুব তাতে ফেচবুক চাই বা হোৱাটছএপ বা খুব টেকনলজিকেলি খুব এডভান্স মানুহখিনি কিন্তু টেকনলজিকেল যোনটো ছ'চিয়েল মিডিয়া বা অল্টাৰনেটিভ মিডিয়াৰ টেকনলজিকেল নলেজ must be now used for improving community relationship. Otherwise, that also is a fault line. আমি শিকিব পাৰোঁ বহুত টেকনলজি but আমি যদি এইটো ইমপ্লিমেণ্ট নকৰোঁ for the well-being of Assam then that is becoming unnecessary. I mean, that is a problem rather than a solution to any of the issues, right? So we are connected, but we are disconnected. Technologically, we are connected to one another, but we are advancing this connection by not really using technology in a way that can enable us to and facilitate community well-being. Or you can. It's a difficult question, Professor Nath, to address in a public forum like this, fault lines of Ohomia, because we are all very sentimental. We are too sentimental. Criticism খুব ভাল কৰি নলওঁ. We don't think that criticism enables us to improve ourselves. আমি criticismটো negatively চাওঁ. এইটো বস্তুখিনি মই আমেৰিকাত আহিহে শিকিলোঁ. That criticism is an opening to improve. Criticism does not mean that kiba eta absolute negativity that you're trying to pull down a person to the point you undermine their ability, right? Criticism, ami constructively jadi law, we can actually really transform ourselves and our community. কিন্তু অসমীয়া মানুহ খুব sentimental. আমি খুব বেয়া পাওঁ আমাৰ কথা কোনোবাই ক'লে আমি খুব ডিফেন্সিভ হৈ পেলাই কথা কওঁ and that does not help. আমাৰ সেইটো এটা social এটা characteristics বুলিয়ে কওঁ সব সকলোৰে আছে এইটো বস্তু we have to change that. আমাৰ সেই confidence building to বেছি হ'ব লাগিব. We lack that confidence to take critical approaches in a way that we can transform it to an advantage.
Thank you, বাইদেউ ইমান সুন্দৰকে হয় এই প্ৰশ্নটো হয়তো আৰু বহুত ইয়াত ক'বলগীয়া আছে কিন্তু আপুনি মূল কথাখিনি ইমান সুন্দৰকে ক'লে মই ভাবো যে ইয়াত উপস্থিত থকা বা ভৱিষ্যতে যিসকলে এই ভিডিঅ'টো চাব তেওঁলোক এই কথাখিনিৰ দ্বাৰা অন্ততঃ অলপ হ'লেও চিন্তা কৰিব যে আমাৰ কিবিলাক ফল্ট লাইনৰ কথা কৈছোঁ ফল্ট লাইন কিবিলাক আছে আৰু আপুনি যিটো কথা ক'লে যে অসমীয়া মানুহ বহুত আৱেগিক মানুহ আৱেগটোৱে আমাক বহুত বিপদত পেলাইছে আৰু আমি আৱেগটো যদি সম্বৰণ নকৰোঁ তেতিয়াহ'লে মই ভাবোঁ যে এইটোৱে আমাক আৰু বিপদত পেলাব এটা কমিউনিটি হিচাপে গতিকে আমাৰ ক'ব লগা আলোচনা কৰিবলগীয়া বহুত কথা থাকিল কিন্তু আমাৰ সময় হৈ আহিছে গতিকে আমি আমাৰ আজিৰ অনুষ্ঠানটো সামৰিম 15 মিনিট শিক্ষাৰ তৰফৰ পৰা আপোনাক আন্তৰিক কৃতজ্ঞতা জনাইছোঁ আমাক ইমানখিনি সময় দিয়াৰ কাৰণে আমাৰ কাৰণে ইমান সুন্দৰ এটা আপুনি বক্তৃতা প্ৰস্তুত কৰাৰ কাৰণে আমি ইয়াত উপস্থিত থকাসকল ইউটিউব বা ফেচবুকত উপস্থিত থকাসকল আৰু ভৱিষ্যতে যিসকলে এই বক্তৃতাটো চাব বা শুনিব তেওঁলোক নিশ্চয় আপোনাৰ চিন্তাৰ গভীৰতাৰ দ্বাৰা মানে তেওঁলোকৰ লাভ হ'ব তাকে কামনা কৰিছোঁ আপোনাক পুনৰবাৰ ধন্যবাদ জনাইছোঁ এই প্লেটফৰ্মত আজি উপস্থিত থকা সকলোকে ধন্যবাদ জনাই আমি আজিৰ অনুষ্ঠানটো সামৰিব খুজিছোঁ তাৰ আগতে পুনৰবাৰ কওঁ যে 20 তাৰিখে আমাৰ যিটো অনুষ্ঠান হ'ব 20 মাৰ্চত সেই 20 মাৰ্চৰ একে সময়তে 7:30 বজাত দেওবাৰ সেইদিনাখন আমাৰ মাজত উপস্থিত থাকিব পাৰভেজ আহমেদ তেওঁ কেৰিয়াৰ ইন এডভাৰটাইজিং এণ্ড ফিল্ম মেকিঙৰ ওপৰত ক'ব আমাৰ শিক্ষাৰ্থীসকল জেনেৰেলি অসমৰ মানুহ সাধাৰণতে আমি ভাবোঁ যে খুব ক্ৰিয়েটিভ হয় তেওঁলোকে খুব কবিতা গল্প এইবোৰ লিখি থাকে গান গায় ছবি আঁকে গতিকে সেইবোৰ যিবোৰ প্ৰতিভা সেইবোৰ প্ৰতিভাকে কেনেকৈ কামত লগাই একোটা বৃত্তি গ্ৰহণ কৰিব পাৰি সেইটো মই ভাবিছোঁ যে এই যিটো আমাৰ পৰৱৰ্তী আলোচনা সেইটোৰ পৰা ওলাই আহিব বা তেওঁলোকে সেইবোৰৰ সম্ভেদ পাব গতিকে আশা ৰাখিছোঁ যে আমাৰ শিক্ষাৰ্থীসকল এই অনুষ্ঠানটোত উপস্থিত থাকিব আৰু ইয়াকে আশা কৰি আমি পুনৰ এই অনুষ্ঠানৰ পৰা বিদায় মাগিছোঁ আজিৰ প্লেটফৰ্মত বহুকেইখন মহাবিদ্যালয়ৰ শিক্ষাৰ্থী উপস্থিত আছে তেওঁলোক আটাইলৈকে ধন্যবাদ জনাইছোঁ কৃতজ্ঞতা জনাইছোঁ আৰু আশা ৰাখিছোঁ যে তেওঁলোকে আমাক সহায় কৰি থাকিব তেওঁলোকৰ শিক্ষাৰ্থীসকলৰ মাজত আমাৰ এই অনুষ্ঠানবোৰৰ বিষয়ে জনাব যাতে আমাৰ যিটো প্ৰচেষ্টা এই প্ৰচেষ্টাটো আমি চলাই যাব পাৰোঁ আৰু এই প্ৰচেষ্টাটোৰ জৰিয়তে আমাৰ যিটো উদ্দেশ্য যে কলেজীয়া পৰ্যায়ৰ শিক্ষাৰ্থীসকল অকল কলেজীয়া পৰ্যায়ৰ শিক্ষাৰ্থীয়েই নহয় শিক্ষাৰ্থীসকলৰ কিবা কামত অহা কিছুমান কথা তেওঁলোকে শিকিবলৈ পাৰিব সেইটো আমাৰ উদ্দেশ্য সফল হ'ব বুলি আশা ৰাখিছোঁ ধন্যবাদ শুভৰাত্ৰি অসমত থকা আটাইলৈকে মই শুভৰাত্ৰি জনাইছোঁ বাইদেউ ধন্যবাদ
Thank you.
বাইদেউ 2 মিনিট ৰ'ব পাৰে বাইদেউ
আপুনি অলপ সময় ৰ'ব পাৰে বাইদেউ
Sure, absolutely.
আপোনাৰ যদি সময় আছে
More Thank you.